you said you mainly worked on this field for about 10 years. What did you then go on to work on?
It was when I first found the shape of the Fermi surface in copper, and David Schomburg began finding similar things in copper and many other metals. It became clear that one could begin to understand some of the peculiar details of electrical conduction, particularly the influence of magnetic fields on conduction. It's very complicated, and the detailed shape of the surface is the thing which gives an explanation of why all these curious things are happening. And I moved on to that, and spent quite a lot of time on magnetoresistance. But other things then cropped up. A thing called magnetic breakdown, which enables electrons in high magnetic fields to go where they ought not to go. There's a purely quantum mechanical effect, and that leads to enormously complicated effects, and that I found very fascinating. So magnetoresistance and things like that occupied me for 15 or 20 years after that, and all the extra bits and thick pieces of that. And I found it wasn't important any with a capital I, anything of that sort. No, it was just enormous fun.
Were you using equipment which you'd helped to design, or were you just buying in? A lot of the scientists I've talked to were quite good with their hands. And
yes. Well, I came back from Malvern at the end of the war, carrying with me a number of bits and pieces. The establishments were very generous at the end of the war. They rather encouraged people who were leaving to take away things which they might find useful. So I took away some oscillator valves and things like that, which I used and applied straight away to superconductors. I got onto the job without any delay at all because of the equipment, and B, the fact I was used to using that sort of thing, could do it. Now, why did I start on this?
Whether you designed any of your own equipment?
Yes. Oh, well, all the things I was using it on were self-designed, yes. And if they were too complicated, they were made in the local workshop in the Mond lab. But small things I could do myself. I wasn't at all bad with my hands.
And you enjoyed tinkering around?
Oh yes. That has disappeared now, alas. I had a road accident about 15 years ago, and lost the sight of one eye. That stops one doing precision work in a workshop altogether.
Were the lab technicians important in the Mond? I mean,
oh yes. The head technician, Frank Sadler, he was a martinet too. I think that the other assistants under him found him very difficult at times. He would stand no nonsense. Things had to be done right. And he was the same with research students too. But I learnt a great deal from Frank. He was totally good. But we did rely. Oh yes, a lot of apparatus had to be made on the spot. Life was very different then from what it is now. You didn't buy glorious boxes and things and apply them. You start from scratch. I much rather enjoy that. I feel much happier working with things I've designed and know how they work, right down to the last nut and bolt.
What effect do you think that has had on how science is proceeding, the fact that you have very expensive equipment which you don't really understand?
I think I feel very uncertain about how to answer that question. I'm so out of sympathy with it.
Well, speak from your heart.
No, it doesn't seem to me that they have so much fun now as we used to have. I don't see young research students, others, going down to the lab and pulling bits of glass about, or putting metal in the lathe and turning out little bits of equipment. They're sitting all their time in front of computers. And I suppose they do experiments, but I never see them doing that. And I do regret it. I think they're missing such an awful lot of fun.
Well, two other bits of fun they might be missing. One is that the old Cavendish and the Mond were notoriously very close to one or two good pubs, like the Eagle and the Bath.
Yes.
Were you involved?
No, we were not pub crawlers.
You
no, the
weren't.
biologists used to spend all their time in pubs.
Yes, that's right.
And the and Crick and Watson and all the rest. They were pub people. And I don't think we hardly ever went. We never said, "Oh, come on, let's have a drink." No, we were working. Damn it.
You must have relaxed in some way. Did you not go for walks or go to the bun shop or get together in other ways?
If we wanted to relax, we got hold of a colleague and had a little chat. Yes. Usually scurrilous, but no, we didn't have to drink while it was going on. No, it was very noticeable, the difference. But we didn't feel we were losing anything. Oh no, we were enjoying ourselves in our own way.
Did you come across Crick and Watson and the others at all?
Oh yes, not in detail. No.
Because they were in a bike shed just nearby.
That's right. Yes, we used to see Crick at tea in the tea room, or I used to hear him. He had
a braying voice.
A loud braying voice. Yes. Watson, I knew rather slightly. Kendra. I hardly ever talked to Kendrew, but we were at school together. He was some 3 or 4 years older than me, but I remember him as from my school days. And we, if we met, we would chat together. But no, I didn't see very much of them. No.
What about Aire Klug? Did you come across him at all?
Hardly at all. No. No, they moved out to
MRC. Yeah.
MRC, yes, and didn't see. No, of course, I know them and can talk with them, but it wasn't the same as just dropping in on them when they were wanting to spend their time doing some lab work and wasting it for them with idle chatter. The idle chatter was just local among us at the Mond and in the Cavendish.
What about the college connection? You're now an honorary fellow of Clare Hall. Were you
and Clare College?
And
yes.
Clare College.
Yes.
Were you at Clare? When you came back, did you become a fellow of Clare?
I came back with a Stokes studentship at Pembroke. Incidentally, that is a small point worth mentioning. It was towards the end of the war when the advertisement came out. They wanted to appoint some Stokes students for research in physics, and John Ashmead, who was my superior in Malvern, suggested that I should try for this, so I went in for it. And in due course I was invited to interview. There were about 5 or 6 of us in the Master's Lodge waiting to be interviewed, all chatting, and all else was so wonderfully clever. They all published papers in Royal Society proceedings. They were all talking about how clever they were, that sort of thing. And they sent them all to be interviewed. About half an hour or so they had. In my turn came, I think they took about a quarter of an hour on me and dismissed me because I'd published nothing. And so I was somewhat surprised when I found I'd been awarded one of the studentships. It was about a year later at a garden party, old Monty Butler, the master, came up to me and said I ought to know that they had decided to put up the pay of the other two Stoke students, but not mine. He said, for one thing, they are married and you're not living in college. But the other thing was, you weren't really on our short list, but we needed someone to look after the chapel music. And I looked after the chapel music for about the 4 terms I was in Pembroke before I went back to Clare as a fellow.
So you did go back to Clare?
Oh, I went back, yes, and I spent about, probably over 15 years as a fellow of Clare, yes.
Were you directing studies or were you teaching for the college?
I was supervising in physics. I don't think I ever directed a study. No, I never became a tutor. No, I was given the option of becoming a tutor or looking after the college library. And I had to look after the college library, which was a non-job.
Did you enjoy, or do you enjoy college life, and do you think it's important?
Oh, very much so, yes. Because I didn't marry until I was in mid-30s, and the college was very important to me, and until then, yes.
I mean, a lot of people speculate on whether the colleges are helpful in one's academic life in terms of either the influence of teaching good undergraduates or meeting people in neighbouring disciplines in an easy, informal atmosphere. Have it?
Well, certainly my experience was that it provided a domestic life and friends you could just chat to over dinner and informally, and the teaching was valuable. I mean, it was valuable to the teacher as well as to the, I hope, to the taught. No, I thoroughly enjoyed my college life. Yeah.
Do you think it's an important stimulus to thought in Cambridge?
I would think that it matters a great deal. I think it's one of the reasons why Oxford and Cambridge have kept such a very high standard of performance. Yes, I think so. The fact that colleges exist is surely one of the things which attracts good students. And the fact that colleges exist is that the dons themselves value the college life and the teaching there. Now, I think it all adds up to an ideal way of a university running itself. I'm probably prejudiced.
Yes, well, you probably are, but have you got any comparative experience? You must have been tempted at times, for example, to go to America.
I spent a year in Chicago, yes. That was work I was doing on thermal surfaces of copper. I did in Chicago, and I found the social life was almost negligible there. I had just married, and so I had the companionship at home. But I got the impression that unmarried people could be very lonely indeed in a place like Chicago. If you went into lunch in the faculty club, you sat on a table for physicists. You didn't mix with other faculties. The great thing about the college, of course, is after dinner, you're chatting with all sorts of people, and ideas cross-fertilise one another. I'm very much in favour of the college life.
Then you, at some point, were appointed as, you became a professor. I mean, you went up through the ranks, presumably.
Yes.
Lecturer, reader.
I was demonstrator,
lecturer, reader, professor.
Yes.
Were you immediately made professor of the Cavendish professor? Is that?
No. I was the John Humphrey Plummer professor for a matter of 10 years or more. Which means I wasn't head of the department, but I Nelmont was the Cavendish professor, and in those days the Cavendish professor was the head of the department automatically. But towards the end of his tenure, he became wholly immersed in his new research ideas on semiconductors and things, and I think he valued having another professor who could take on administrative jobs, and particularly when it came to rebuilding the Cavendish, I was very much involved in that, and he kept out of it.
What was Mott like, Neville Mott? He's in the enviable category.
Very much so, yes. Yes. He was a very good physicist. He was almost an old-fashioned sort of physicist. He wasn't an experimenter, but his theoretical work was always based on the idea of experiments. He was in touch. He knew what experiments ought to be done. I'm sure he would have done them very badly himself, but he was a man with a very good physical intuition, wonderful, and he was an extremely nice man too. He was great fun. He was shy. There was the shyness there, yes, but if you got through the shyness, he could be very amusing. And when he died, Ted Davis, who had worked with him, produced a book of reminiscences by about 90 physicists who just wrote short essays about him, and it's perfectly clear that he had an enormous influence on their lives.
As he did on yours, presumably.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes.
We met at a celebration at the Needham Institute, and I wondered whether you knew Joseph. You're on the board of the Needham Institute, the Committee of Management, for some time. Did you know Joseph at all well?
Not at all well, no. When I was president of Clare Hall, I was occasionally called to meetings of heads of houses to discuss something or other, and Joseph was always, when he was a Master of Keys, would be there, and so in a sense we got to know each other very slightly. I never had any long conversation, but one day he rang me up to say that I would probably know that they were building a new institute out in West Cambridge, and they were going to set up a management committee. Would I like to be on the management committee? Well, what I knew about management committees was they met once a year, and they heard the director tell them what was happening, and they'd say, "Jolly good, carry on, and have a nice lunch." So I said, "Yes, that's fine." I didn't realise that, in fact, he wanted a management committee. He wanted actually people to sit round and look after the nuts and bolts of the institute. Anyhow, I'd agreed to do it. And then when a fortnight later he asked me, he said, "We shall need a chairman of the management committee. Would you like to do it?" I thought, well, knowing some other people on the management committee, I'd rather chair them than be under them in the chair. So yes, I said, So I took on that, and first thing I did was to reorganise the management committee and get practically everybody off it. It was something 20 or more people, and they were all people who might conceivably have some interest, but we knocked it down to a small number of people actually actively concerned with managing the institute. And I looked after that for some years, and became a trustee. And I remained a trustee. I'm totally useless at it. I don't know anything at all about Chinese science, and I know very little about what they do. But I went on to trustee meetings, and I sit quietly and agree when agreement is necessary.
Well, you've obviously a good manager. I was going to ask you about that because you've had the experience of both managing, as it were, i.e. being head of department of a very, very big and important Cambridge Science Department, physics, and also head of a smaller college.
Yes.
Tell me about the comparative experience of running those two institutions.
Right, well, my experience of both of them was it was very easy. I know that sounds very strange.
It does sound strange.
In those happy old days, on the whole, we were left alone. And well, as far as the Cavendish was concerned, I was head of it. I had in Shirley Field House an exceptionally good secretary who could be utterly relied on to do all the small dirty works and things, and who could take letters and correct them if necessary. And there was also a departmental secretary who did all the dirty work, like appointing and looking after assistants and so on.
Was this an academic secretary?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So being head of department was in fact a very easy task. I just had to be there and very occasionally answer a question or two and make small suggestions, but not very much.
You didn't have devolved accounting. You didn't have to do all the financial.
No, not a bit of it. No, we had a financial officer as well as an academic secretary. Oh no, it was a job. To be head of a large department is much easier than to be head of a small department.
So I've heard.
Yes. And now the college, in a sense, was rather the same. I was the first president of Clare Hall. It was small. We only had a few fellows, and then after 2 or 3 years we started taking research students. But it always remained small in those days, and what was very noticeable was it was a new college and everybody wanted it to work well. Again, that makes the head of house a very easy task. He has people who make positive suggestions about what to do. Again, all he has to do is to say, "That's a good idea." Yes. Take the chair at governing body meetings and just see things. The discussions, free discussion goes on, and decisions are made. There was very, very little in the way of friction the whole 7 years I had there. So I have not had a characteristic time being head of anything. I've had the easy time.
And you never found it a distraction from your research or teaching?
No, when I became Cavendish professor, I stopped taking any research students. That would have, to be down in the lab chatting to research students, perhaps for an hour or two, and over problems, would have been too much of a distraction. Yes, so I didn't have any new research students after I became Cavendish professor, and I could write books.
When you were supervising research students, how many did you characteristically
About
have?
6.
Hmm.
Yeah. And again, in those days it was comparatively easy. For one, we got very, very good material. The students who wanted to come and do low temperature physics were on the whole top class students, and once they'd been settled down a bit and decided what they were going to do, they would get on with the job, and one would go around and talk and be friendly. Only very rarely was it necessary to take positive action. One or two, for example, didn't know how to write. And they had one in particular, who was a very good student, hadn't the beginning of a clue on how to write a paper. And I spent an afternoon going through his first attempt, taking it to bits, sentence by sentence. And when I'd finished, he said, "Nobody has ever said that to me before." And his thesis was perfectly well written. I was very gratified that he was such a good student. But no, but that was a rare thing.
When you mentioned going down for an hour, would you go down when you did have these 6 students? How much time would you spend with any one of them every week? I mean, would you spend a few minutes every week with them, or?
It's difficult to remember it. I would be in the lab, if necessary, for a whole morning or something, discussing the physics of their problem with and that sort of thing. Yes, not doing it doing it, but simply suggesting interpretations of things and what had gone wrong with the experiment and so on and so forth. I would have thought that every student would have up to an hour a week in odd bits and pieces, and very likely more. It was a major task and a major enjoyment looking after research students.
Tell me about your first one, who I think went on to win a Nobel Prize. I don't know if any of the others did as well, but certainly Brian Josephson.
Well,
it was Brian Josephson, was that right?
That's right. Yes,
yeah.
Yes. Well, he was a strange young man. He had got a first in the maths tripos, had been top, I think, of the maths tripos, had turned over to do physics for 1 year and become top of the physics tripos. And I saw him once or twice in the lab and was actually quite horrified at his total incompetence. I'm so much so that when I overheard one student saying to another, "If you want to know anything about physics, ask Brian Josephson," and I honestly thought that was a cruel bit of cynicism.
Yeah.
Not the least, he was very, very good, but quite incompetent with his hands. But when he came to be a research student, he elected to do an experiment in experimental physics, because he said he could do the maths and he could do the theoretical physics, but he was so bad at experiment he had better do a PhD and learn how to be good at experiment. But in fact, he did show himself to be quite good at learning how to get over his ham-handedness with equipment. But about in his second year, I came down to the lab one day and he was there, and he began talking to me about some idea he had, and I could not understand a word he was saying, he was always incoherent. He was more incoherent than ever. So after about 10 minutes, I stopped him and said, "I don't understand what you're saying. Go and talk to Phil Anderson. He will understand what you're talking about." So he went off to talk to Phil Anderson, and on the strength of that, he wrote a short letter and got a Nobel Prize for it.
It was on the basis of the short letter, was it?
Yes.
In Nature or something, was it?
No, it was in a newish journal. What's it called? Physics something. I've forgotten what it's called now. A newish English journal. I was asked some years later, why ever did you get Brian Joseph to publish that paper in that rotten journal? I said, well, of course it ought to have gone into the Physical Review letters, which was the high quality one, but we weren't allowed to spend dollars in those days. We hadn't got the means of publishing in America. So he went. Anyhow, it was a very good paper, and Phil Anderson was very much responsible for knocking it into shape.
Is he still around, Josephson, or?
Yes, he's just about retired now.
He's in Cambridge still.
He's in Cambridge, so yes, in Fellowship at Trinity.
So, returning to your own work, you mentioned then that you wrote quite a few books. I mean, some of your what did you write about? What were your books?
Most of the other ones were about teaching, were for students. There was the one which is mentioned in that write-up at Wikipedia, the Cavendish problems, which was a collection of 200 and something problems suitable for first 2 years of physics. They're covering a wide spectrum of problems. I wrote a little book on thermodynamics, which sold extremely well, and it was used by lots of students. Then I've written on electrons in metals, again a sort of advanced student book, and on physics of vibration. That was what at head of department, with time to spare, I wrote this two-volume work on vibrations and things, covering a wide range of topics, and magnetoresistance. They were mainly at an advanced student level, or general professional interest, not teaching works. I just enjoyed writing them.
You enjoy writing?
Oh yes, I did in those days. Yes.
Do you? A number of scientists I've talked to are very keen on making science accessible to a wider audience, people like Martin Rees or John Thomas or whatever. Is that something that has interested you at all?
I've never felt I had a gift for that. No, I can write, I believe, or could write acceptable things for semi-professional, or say advanced students. I could make them interesting, and I could write fairly lucidly about them. But I've never felt a strong wish to take up a semi-popular writing. I don't disagree with it. I feel other people could do it so much better than I can.
I sometimes ask one or two general questions. One of them on religion.
Yes.
Have your probings into the deeper recesses of physics made you have any strong views on the existence or non-existence or possible existence of a deity?
Yeah. My view is not strong. My strongest views are against those atheists who who are so certain that there is no such thing as God. that I think is absolute nonsense. They cannot possibly know. I've known one or two people like Charlie Mole who were so obviously saints, people whose belief had inculcated them in the most amazing charity.
Who was Charlie Mole?
He was Dean of Clare and became later Margaret Professor of Divinity. He died just recently at a very great age, but he was a man who made me certain that one could not be sure of there was no God. And I have no religious views. I'm not compelled to believe in any way, but I have no reason for supposing that there was not something. The creation of the universe wasn't something just happened out of the blue. No. To me it's very important to realise that science is extremely limited in the things it can cope with. It cannot cope with human feelings or beliefs at all, and shouldn't. And it's the very strength of science lies in the fact it does not try to do things which it cannot do. It tries to cope with objective matter, things that every reasonable person would agree about. But how one individual thinks and acts is quite beyond the power of science to talk about. And so those who are so sure there's no God are sure of something which is utterly unprovable and doesn't certainly lie within the range of their science too.
So the people like Dawkins who think that science has dispelled God.
Absolutely. There's not the slightest basis for their belief. No. And although I cannot say I know you're wrong, what I do know is that they must not say a thing like that and get away with it.
And you can understand how Newton was both very religious and
oh yes, I can.
Great scientist.
You only have to meet someone who is genuinely religious, and Charlie Mole was an example, to realise that is possible. It's not someone who's religious because he was brought up that way and got stuck like that. It's someone who one feels is genuinely in contact with the truth.
What about the forms of religion? Do you go to chapel? Did you go to chapel in Clare? And I don't know whether Clare has a chapel.
When I was a bachelor, Sundays were rather boring, and I used to go to chapel. I regarded it as partly a duty, but also the sermons were good. I didn't mind at all, and the
music.
I was much concerned with the music. Yes. So, and I didn't feel in the least hypocritical going to chapel. No, but nowadays the only times I go to church are for someone's memorial service.
Yes, which happens more and more frequently. What about politics? Have you taken any strong political line?
No, I'm not politically minded. No, no. I'm very narrow, really, in my beliefs and in my actions and things. Politics is not one of those things. I know I cannot play any part.
So you've never been a strong member of any political party?
No. Oh, in my young days, I used to believe that I could do things better than some people. But I never believed so strongly as to actually take action about it. So, no.
What about experience of other cultures apart from America? Do you travel at all, or have you been to Asia, for instance, to China or Japan? Or
no,
India?
I've not been. I've been to Japan for conferences, yes, and I've been to India, or rather Kashmir, for a week-long meeting on educational problems. But I've been on many occasions to America. I used to serve on an IBM committee, but I've never been to Africa. I regret to say.
Or South America?
Or South America, no.
Or China?
Or China, or Antarctica, no.
The list grows longer.
No, many places in Europe, many places in America. Yes.
Now's the time. Anyway.
No, I'm not a traveller by instinct. No.
Are you a gardener? Do you have a garden?
No, I'm a destructive gardener. And my wife is very keen on gardening, and I occasionally have to dig up a root or something of that sort, or I used to mow the lawns. Essentially destructive work was my strong field, but I'm not doing it anymore now.
Was your wife an academic or?
No. She was taught at the Cambridge Art School, and she learnt calligraphy and bookbinding.
Oh,
and she's remained. She's still back on the bookbinding after many years absent for the Ancient India and Iran Trust, whose books are in sad news of repair and looking after, and she's doing that in her spare time.
Very interesting. One thing I often end with, so to speak, is, and it comes as a shock to people, is to ask you if you were advising a young graduate student who was just starting on their PhD or on their research about things to remember when they're doing scientific research. Is there any advice you would give such a person? Usually people end up by saying, well, really make sure you really want to do it before you start off, or choose a field that...
I take for granted that they want to do it. If someone, not at that stage, but at an earlier stage, asked for advice, very rarely this has happened, should they do physics? On the whole, I say, I think the future in science lies in biological sciences, not in the physical sciences, which are getting a little old and tired. But biological sciences are flourishing like mad. That's the sort of advice which I can honestly give. I take for granted that they are honest people. That is, when they want to do science, they want to do it to find out something which is reasonably true, and not just do it for a living, and truth comes second. But that's the students we get have been on the whole remarkably honest people. One could take it for granted. If it does happen that they turn out to be a bit off, one can speak to them firmly. But in my experience in the Cavendish, I can only remember one student who tried to get away with faking his results, and we managed to persuade him to disappear.
You disappeared him, as they say nowadays.
Yeah. But no, I had very little occasion to give advice to anybody. I don't, or if I do, I've forgotten about it. Yeah.
I was going to ask about your own working methods. Some people get their best ideas when they're going for a walk, or when they're gardening, or when they're in the shower, or whatever. Do you spend a lot of time just sitting thinking, or do you mainly get your ideas from conversations, or where, or in the lab?
Well, it's now so long since I had any decent ideas. But certainly I think I used to work better in the evening than in the morning. In the morning I would have been in the lab anyhow doing practical things, but when it came to thinking out results and working out problems and things, then that was usually an evening matter, and or even lying awake at night worrying about things. Not worrying, but just fretting slightly over a problem. But the truth is that problems used to arise very rarely. Life was not a continuous succession of problems. It was often a long, experimentally, a long series of experiments, and the problems arose incidentally. One could usually solve fairly quickly. It's only when a major piece of interpretation is necessary, and that only happened in my life perhaps half a dozen times. Only then that one really has to say, I must go away and think a bit. No, it's not something which I think I can answer honestly. If I had problems, they were there all the time, and the solution, if it came at all, would come unasked for. You know the story about Einstein being interviewed by a journalist, do you understand? A journalist asked him if how he worked, and he said he usually worked in the morning, and in the afternoon he would go for a nice long walk, and you take a notebook with you to record important thoughts. No, he said, I never have any important thoughts. If I do, I don't forget them.
A very nice story, yes. Yeah. Well, it's a very nice story to end on, unless there was anything that you would have liked me to have asked you.
I don't think so. No. I think you've covered the field pretty well. Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much indeed.
Not a bit.
Ryan, that was lovely.
Thank you for being so generous about your time.
It's a pleasure.